Get out! You are lower class!
The camera was already rolling when it happened, the insult that froze an entire courtroom. Karen Lowell leaned back in her chair, arms crossed, voice dripping with disdain as she smirked at the most feared woman on daytime television, and said, "People like you will never understand class, Judge. You're lower class." The audience gasped in unison, sound cutting out like the air had been sucked from the room. Even the bailiff blinked, unsure if he'd heard correctly. For the first time in years, Judge Judy didn't speak. She didn't have to. Her stare alone felt like a sentence. And in the next 20 seconds, the entire internet would watch in awe as a woman who thought she was untouchable realized just how small arrogance looks under the weight of justice. But you won't believe what Judge Judy decided next. It will shock you. Before we dive in, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Karen Lowell was the kind of woman who believed money could bend reality. A real estate broker turned social media influencer. She'd built her small-town reputation on designer shoes, dinner party dominance, and a carefully curated image of superiority. She didn't sell homes anymore. She sold herself, one filtered post at a time. Her mantra was simple: status is everything, empathy is weakness. When she entered Judge Judy's courtroom that morning, it wasn't humility that followed her. It was perfume thick enough to choke the first 2 rows, and an aura of smug defiance that even the cameras seemed to recoil from. She wasn't here to seek justice. She was here for a performance. Across from her sat Daniel Price, a soft-spoken small business owner in his late 50s, sleeves rolled neatly to his elbows, eyes weary from months of legal battles he never wanted. His company had remodeled Karen's property, a project she refused to pay for because, as she told her followers, it didn't meet my standards of class. Daniel had poured his own savings into the work, even paying his crew out of pocket, while waiting for her final check that never came. The dispute was supposed to be simple, an unpaid invoice. But it had turned into something uglier, a war of ego versus integrity. The producers had no idea what they were about to film. What began as another routine civil case would become one of the most viral, most dissected, and most reshared moments in courtroom television history. Karen lounged in her chair like she owned the building, legs crossed, designer pen tapping against her manicured nails. Every gesture was a statement, every sigh a declaration of superiority. She'd told friends the night before, "This old TV judge can't scare me. I've dealt with tougher men than her." But arrogance has a sound, and the microphones picked up every syllable. Judge Judy, meanwhile, sat perfectly still. Her decades on the bench had given her radar for narcissism. She could feel it before a word was even spoken. And Karen radiated it like heat off asphalt. Behind Judy's composed expression, something colder was forming. A calculation. A quiet patience that the show's editors would later slow down and replay in dramatic close-ups. Daniel tried to keep his composure. He spoke softly, explaining timelines, invoices, and work orders. Every fact he mentioned made Karen roll her eyes. Every attempt at civility made her lips twist tighter into that smirk. When he mentioned how the unpaid job nearly cost one of his employees their home, Karen whispered just loud enough for microphones to catch. "Not my problem if poor people can't manage their money," the audience murmured. Someone gasped. But Judge Judy didn't interrupt him, not yet. She was letting the rope play out. That's when Karen decided to push further. "People like him," she said, gesturing toward Daniel, "don't understand quality. I shouldn't be punished for having standards. I live in a world of excellence. I surround myself with people who belong there." Judy's eyes lifted slowly from the file in front of her. No movement, just that stare. The kind of look that had made thousands of liars fold before her. The cameras zoomed in on Karen, catching the faint flicker of uncertainty behind her practiced expression. But the mask stayed. She smiled wider, mistaking the silence for weakness. She was about to learn that silence in Judge Judy's courtroom wasn't surrender. It was the warning before impact, because what Karen didn't know was that Judy had already spoken to Daniel before the taping and learned something that would change everything about this case. Judge Judy wasn't just listening. She was waiting for the perfect moment to spring the trap. Karen Lowell had never lost anything she couldn't buy her way out of. Not a deal, not a friendship, not a reputation. Her secret wasn't intelligence, it was intimidation. She knew how to make people feel smaller, how to twist politeness into submission. Contractors, assistants, waiters, she crushed them all with the same dismissive smile and the same 6 words: "People like you wouldn't understand class." This lawsuit wasn't about money. Not really. The $12,000 Daniel was suing for was pocket change to her. 1 handbag, 1 dinner, 1 impulse purchase. But to Karen, losing meant something far worse than a financial hit. It meant public humiliation. And that she could not afford, because behind the facade of confidence was a woman living on the edge of collapse. Her influencer career, her so-called luxury lifestyle brand, was hanging by a thread. Sponsors were growing tired of her diva behavior. Comments under her posts were turning against her. Out of touch, entitled, "Fake rich." Those words stung more than any court ruling ever could. She needed this appearance on Judge Judy to fix her image, to show the world that she was the victim of a lazy contractor, not the villain people thought she was. She didn't just come to win. She came to perform redemption. But the problem with staging a performance in Judge Judy's courtroom is simple. Judy doesn't watch plays. She reads truth. Daniel Price's motive was the opposite of Karen's. He didn't care about cameras or public perception. He'd taken this case because it was his last option. The unpaid job had drained his small company's savings. He had maxed out his credit cards paying his workers, believing Karen's promise that the wire will clear tomorrow. That wire never came. 2 of his employees had already left, one of them losing his apartment in the process. To Daniel, this case wasn't about revenge, it was about survival. About showing that people who exploit others can't just walk away smiling. Judge Judy understood that better than anyone. She'd spent decades watching the strong crush the vulnerable under the weight of arrogance. And while she never showed emotion on camera, this case had struck a chord. Because before Daniel's complaint ever hit her desk, Judy's producers had flagged something unusual. Karen had appeared in court twice before, both times for similar disputes. 2 different contractors, 2 unpaid invoices, 2 dismissed cases after settlements that quietly disappeared. Pattern, manipulation, fraud, and now, sitting in front of her, Karen was smirking again, certain she was untouchable. As Judy watched, she saw something that most people missed. Karen wasn't nervous. She was enjoying herself. She saw this courtroom as her stage, the audience as extras in her performance. She laughed under her breath when Daniel stumbled on his words. She adjusted her diamond bracelet every time Judy looked down at her notes, ensuring the camera caught the sparkle. But Judy was already building something, a structure in her mind as precise as a legal trap. She'd seen it before. The entitled walk in loud, but they leave silent. She just needed the right moment to expose the truth. As the minutes ticked by, Judy flipped through the case file one last time and found something Daniel hadn't even realized was in his favor. A single page that would change everything. A document signed by Karen herself, buried among her own evidence, contradicting the story she had rehearsed. Karen didn't know it yet, but she had already sealed her fate. The tension in the room was building like a held breath. Even the cameramen could feel it, that electric prelude to something monumental. Karen leaned back, twirling her pen between manicured fingers. "Honestly," she said, voice loud enough for microphones to catch, "I can't believe we're wasting everyone's time on this nonsense." Daniel exhaled slowly. The bailiff shifted. Judge Judy didn't flinch. Behind that calm stare, every piece was falling into place. Judge Judy had seen arrogance before, but never this perfectly documented. And when she spoke next, the game would change forever. Judge Judy didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. Her silence was doing the work for her, a silence sharp enough to slice through the noise of Karen's smug laughter and the faint hum of the studio lights. The audience had stopped shifting in their seats. They knew something was coming. That stillness, that eerie calm, was always the signal that Judge Judy had spotted a lie. Karen, of course, mistook it for intimidation. She smirked, adjusting her blazer like a queen straightening her crown. "Your Honor, with all due respect," she said, her tone the opposite of respectful, "I've been through plenty of contracts. This is just another example of people trying to profit from my success." Her words hung in the air, coated in entitlement. Judge Judy's response was deceptively calm. "Contracts," she repeated, flipping through the papers before her. Fascinating documents, especially when they reveal more than the person signing them realizes. Karen blinked. Excuse me? Judy didn't look up. You said you've been through plenty of contracts, Miss Lowell. That's true. I see 3 previous civil cases in the system, all with remarkably similar claims, all settled out of court, and all involving unpaid services. Karen froze for a fraction of a second. So quick an untrained eye would have missed it, but Judy didn't miss anything. Perhaps, Judy, continued, voice still soft, you could remind me why those payments were never completed. Karen's confidence faltered, her laugh sounding thinner now. Oh, those were misunderstandings, Your Honor. You know how these things go. People make mistakes, they exaggerate. Besides, I always settle fairly. Fairly, Judy repeated. She let the word roll off her tongue like something bitter. So you're telling this court you've never intentionally withheld payment from anyone who provided you with legitimate service? Karen straightened, her instinct to argue kicking in. Never. I have standards, not grudges. That line, I have standards, would later become the most memed phrase from the episode, shared millions of times under captions like, "When arrogance meets karma." Judy didn't react. She simply turned to the bailiff. Could you hand me Exhibit D, please? The bailiff placed a single page on her desk, a copy of Karen's own text messages, submitted by Daniel's attorney. Judy read them silently, her lips tightening just slightly at one corner, a micro-expression that die-hard fans of the show knew well. It meant the blade was about to drop. Ms. Lowell, Judy said slowly, her voice turning deliberate, I want to read something to you. A message you sent to Mr. Price 2 days after he finished the renovation. Does this sound familiar? She looked down and began to read aloud, her voice echoing through the courtroom. I'll pay when I feel like it. Don't rush me, you work for people like me, not with them. A collective gasp rippled through the audience. Daniel's eyes widened. Karen's froze. That was taken out of context, she stammered, shifting uncomfortably in her seat. It was sarcasm. He was being rude first. Judy raised a hand. The motion was small but enough to silence the entire room. Sarcasm? You think threatening someone's livelihood is a joke? Karen's mouth opened, then closed. For the first time, the smirk vanished. Judge Judy leaned back in her chair, her tone flattening into something colder, quieter, more surgical. I've met your type before, Ms. Lowell. People who mistake cruelty for sophistication, who think that demeaning others makes them powerful. She tapped the text message with one manicured finger. But what you don't understand is that this, right here, is evidence, and it speaks volumes about your character. Karen swallowed. For the first time, her eyes flickered toward the cameras. The confidence that once fueled her performance was cracking, hairline fractures spreading across the glass facade of control. Judy didn't press further, not yet. She wanted the silence to work. She wanted Karen to feel the weight of what she'd just heard. Then, with unnerving calm, she closed the folder and said, Let's proceed. I have a few more questions about your definition of class. Karen tried to regain her composure, brushing invisible dust off her sleeve. Of course, Your Honor. Whatever you need. But the audience could already sense it. The balance of power had shifted. Judge Judy wasn't reacting to Karen anymore. She was orchestrating her downfall. The trap had been set, and when it finally snapped shut, the sound would echo far beyond that courtroom. The studio air felt electric, charged with something between awe and discomfort. Every face in the audience said the same thing. Did she really just say that? Judge Judy's eyes hadn't left Karen's. The cameras captured it all. The frozen. Half-smile, the twitch at the corner of Judy's mouth, the calm before the thunder. Then suddenly the camera cut to you, the viewer. If you were sitting in that courtroom, whose side would you be on? Type it in the comments right now. Team Justice or Team Karen? And don't just watch, join the jury. That brief fourth wall break became one of the most shared interactive clips from the episode. Viewers around the world flooded the comments, picking sides, arguing ethics, rewatching the moment when arrogance met consequence. The engagement spiked, but inside the courtroom, no one was thinking about likes or shares. Karen still believed she was winning. She mistook the silence for control. She leaned back, whispering to herself, Easy money. But Daniel Price sat straighter now. For the first time, he saw something shift behind Judge Judy's expression, not anger, but purpose. He could almost feel the rhythm of justice winding up behind those famous words that always began her verdicts. The audience sensed it too. They weren't watching a show anymore. They were witnessing a moral reckoning. Judge Judy finally broke the stillness. "Ms. Lowell," she said, tone deceptively calm, "I'd like you to explain something to me, and to the millions of people watching." Karen smiled again, ready to perform. "Of course, Your Honor, I'd be delighted," but her voice wavered. The confidence wasn't landing like before. The microphone caught the faint tremor that betrayed her nerves. Judy continued, "You've used the phrase lower class twice today, once toward Mr. Price and once toward me. Before we proceed, I'd like to know what that means in your world," the audience murmured. Karen blinked, realizing too late that this wasn't a question. It was a setup. "Oh, I just meant—" Judy raised a hand. "Oh no, don't soften it now. Tell us exactly what you meant." Karen's throat tightened. "It's just a figure of speech." Judy leaned forward. "So is case dismissed, but that one carries consequences." The laughter that followed wasn't joyful. It was sharp, uneasy, a collective release of tension. Karen tried to chuckle along, but the sound came out brittle. She glanced at the cameras again, then at Daniel, who was now quietly folding his papers, as if he already knew how this would end. Judge Judy tapped her pen twice against the bench. The sound echoed like a countdown. 2 taps, 2 warnings, let's resume, she said simply. And just like that, the show was no longer entertainment. It was a live demonstration of poetic justice being assembled, piece by piece, in front of millions. What Karen said next would turn that calm courtroom into a moral battlefield. When the cameras reset for the next segment, Karen Lowell treated it like a fashion show. The courtroom lights caught the shimmer of her sequined blazer as she uncrossed. Her legs straightened her posture and performed a smile that looked rehearsed down to the millimeter. Every flick of her wrist, every tilt of her chin, was a choreography of control. She believed appearances were power, and the more the audience whispered, the higher she lifted her chin. "Let's begin," Judge Judy said. Her voice was flat, no inflection, no warmth. A blank slate hiding something vast beneath. Karen crossed her legs again, letting her heel tap the table leg. Tap, tap, tap. The rhythm sounded like entitlement, and even the microphones picked it up. "Ms. Lowell," Judy began, "for the record, please explain why you refused to pay Mr. Price for his completed work." Karen smiled, tilting her head toward the audience as though they were her followers on a live stream. "Well, Your Honor, I believe the workmanship was, how do I put it, substandard. It didn't reflect the aesthetic I represent." Judge Judy blinked slowly. "The aesthetic you represent?" "Yes," Karen said, her voice gaining momentum. "I run a lifestyle brand. People expect perfection. The man left visible nail marks on the window frames. You can imagine how lower tier that looks." Gasps. It wasn't the insult that drew them, it was the tone, the dripping disdain, the kind that fills the air like perfume and poison at once. Daniel tried to interject. "Your Honor, those were the original wooden frames. She approved that finish in writing." Karen waved him off, her voice slicing through his words. "Please, don't embarrass yourself." Judy's hand twitched once, an imperceptible motion, like a trigger being tested. "You interrupted him," she said. "Excuse me?" Karen blinked. "I said," Judy repeated, still calm, "you interrupted him." "In my courtroom?" The quiet after that sentence was heavy enough to feel like gravity. Karen laughed it off, or tried to. "Oh, come on, Judge, don't take it so seriously. I'm just trying to move things along." But Judy didn't smile. The air conditioning hummed louder. The audience stopped breathing again. "You'll find," Judy said, leaning forward, "that I take respect very seriously, Ms. Lowell." Karen's smirk faltered for the first time. Daniel sat back, watching the exchange with a mixture of awe and dread. He'd seen this look before, in war documentaries, when a general goes silent just before delivering orders that end the battle. The cameraman zoomed in. Sweat shimmered at the base of Karen's hairline, betraying the poise she worked so hard to maintain. Still, she forced a smile. "Your Honor, I didn't mean any disrespect. I'm just saying, People like Mr. Price should know their place when dealing with people of my... She stopped herself too late. The words people like hung in the air like an echo that refused to die. Judge Judy sat back, folding her hands. The small motion somehow felt monumental. "You're... what?" she asked softly. Karen swallowed. "Nothing. A just figure of speech." "No," Judy said, her tone turning glacial. "Say it. Complete your sentence." Karen's eyes darted toward the audience, then back to Judy. "I just meant people of my social tier." A ripple went through the audience. Even Daniel shook his head slowly. Judy's expression didn't change. "I see," she said simply, picking up her pen and making a note. "Proceed." No one realized it then, but that single word, proceed, was the starting gun for Karen's unraveling, because from this point on, every sentence Karen spoke would dig her grave a little deeper. The next moments felt like a slow-motion collision, one person's arrogance smashing into another's decency. "Mr. Price," Judge Judy said, her voice level again, "please tell the court exactly what you did for Ms. Lowell and how you fulfilled your agreement." Daniel cleared his throat, adjusting his tie. He wasn't a showman. He wasn't built for TV, but there was quiet steadiness in his tone, the kind of calm that only people who've worked hard their whole lives can project. "I remodeled Ms. Lowell's sunroom and replaced the rotted flooring," he began. "She approved every stage. I have the signed texts and photos of progress. She even posted one on Instagram with the caption, 'Perfection under construction.'" The courtroom chuckled softly. Even Judge Judy allowed the faintest flicker of amusement. Karen crossed her arms. "Yes, and I also deleted it when I saw the final product, which frankly looked like a cheap DIY project from a discount show." Daniel's jaw tightened, but he didn't respond. He looked at Judge Judy, not at her. "Your Honor, I just wanted fair pay. I put in 19 days of labor and materials out of pocket." She refused to pay a cent, said it wasn't up to her standards. Karen leaned forward. "Because it wasn't. Look at the pictures. Do these look like luxury finishes? Be honest." She waved a glossy photo printout toward the audience like a teacher demanding validation. Judge Judy raised a hand. "You'll address me, Ms. Lowell, not the audience." Karen rolled her eyes visibly dramatically, the kind of eye roll that could be seen from the parking lot. The camera zoomed in, catching it in crisp HD, and just like that, the energy in the room shifted again. "Did you just roll your eyes at me?" Judy asked softly. Karen froze. "No, I don't lie," Judy cut in, voice slicing through her like cold steel. "You did, and let me make something perfectly clear. In this courtroom you don't perform. You participate," the crowd murmured. Daniel looked down, fighting a smile. Karen tried to laugh it off. "Oh, please, are we really focusing on an eye roll? I thought this was about facts, not feelings." Judge Judy didn't blink. "You'll find that attitude often determines credibility. And right now, yours is bankrupt." That line, "yours is bankrupt," would later become the soundbite of the year, replayed in TikTok edits, courtroom reaction videos, and motivational clips titled, "When Karma Speaks with a Brooklyn Accent." Karen's cheeks flushed crimson. "This is ridiculous. I'm being attacked for having standards." Daniel's voice rose for the first time. "Standards don't mean stepping on people." The audience gasped, not at the words, but at the strength in his voice. Karen turned toward him, her tone sharpening to a hiss. "You're just upset because you can't handle successful women." Judy's head tilted slightly. "Excuse me?" Karen smirked, sensing a tension. "So you know the type, Your Honor. The men who get intimidated when they deal with women of higher status." That was it, the moment the courtroom collectively stopped breathing. Daniel blinked slowly, then said with quiet precision, "I've spent my life building things with my hands. Honest things. I don't care about your status, ma'am. I care about honesty, something money can't buy." The silence that followed was thick enough to feel Judge Judy finally spoke, her tone now dangerously measured. "Mr. Price, you may sit down. You've said enough." Then turning her gaze back to Karen, "And Ms. Lowell, I suggest you start choosing your words more carefully. You're entering dangerous territory." Karen, still smirking, shrugged. "If telling the truth is dangerous, maybe people should try living it." Judge Judy smiled, but it wasn't kindness. It was foreshadowing. "Don't worry," she said, voice low and controlled. "We'll see who's living the truth before this is over." The bailiff's eyes widened slightly. He'd heard that tone before. It was the same tone Judy used seconds before ending someone's career on national television. Karen leaned back, satisfied that she'd made her point. But the viewers watching at home could feel it. She hadn't just crossed the line. She'd lit it on fire. Because what happened next wasn't just disrespect. It was the moment arrogance committed public suicide. Tension crawled through the air like static. Even the camera operators stopped breathing, sensing that something ugly was about to surface. Judge Judy folded her hands. "Ms. Lowell, you may continue." Karen exhaled through a laugh, brittle, too loud, and flicked her hair over one shoulder as though she were on a reality show set. "Not in a courtroom." "Well," she began, "I just think certain people take themselves way too seriously." Judy's eyebrow arched. "Certain people?" "Yes," Karen said, smiling thinly. "The kind who think yelling and intimidation equals authority." "Say, it's sort of tacky, don't you think?" A low murmur rippled through the audience. The bailiff shifted his stance. Judy didn't respond. She just watched. Karen mistook that silence for weakness. The fatal misread that would end her. She kept talking. "Look, I grew up in a family of class. We know how to handle things with grace. But in this environment," she gestured toward the bench, the cameras, the audience, "you can't really expect sophistication." Gasps. Judy blinked once, slowly. "Sophistication," she repeated, her tone neutral enough to be terrifying. Karen leaned forward, voice dropping to a whisper the microphone still caught. "I mean, come on. People like you wouldn't understand class." The air vanished. The audience froze mid-breath. The bailiff's jaw flexed, ready to move if he had to. For a full second, 2, 3, 5. Nothing happened. Then Judy placed her pen down with surgical precision. Tap. The sound echoed like a hammer on steel. "People like me," she said quietly. "Explain that." Karen's confidence faltered for half a heartbeat, then came roaring back. "Don't twist my words, Judge. I'm simply saying there's a difference between people who come from refinement and those who work their way up." Judy didn't blink. "And which one are you, Ms. Lowell?" Karen smiled as if it were an interview. The former, obviously. The audience couldn't believe it. She'd just said it again. Someone in the back whispered, "She's done." Judy stood up slowly. She almost never did. The movement drew every eye in the room. "Ms. Lowell," she said, her voice now low and resonant. "For 25 years, I've listened to arrogance disguise itself as education. I've heard people confuse privilege for superiority. But this," she pointed a single finger at Karen, "this is pure ignorance wearing pearls." Applause rippled from the gallery before the bailiff raised his hand for silence. Karen's face reddened. "I don't have to sit here and be insulted." Judy's reply came without pause. "You don't have to, but you will. Because this is my courtroom, and for the next few minutes you're going to learn what real class looks like." That sentence hit like thunder. The cameras zoomed tight on Karen's face, the panic flicker behind her mascaraed eyes. Daniel Price watched quietly, a faint look of vindication crossing his face. He didn't gloat. He didn't smile. He just knew the tide had turned. Judy sat back down, calm again, like the storm had chosen where to strike next. "Continue, Ms. Lowell," she said evenly. "Dig as deep as you'd like. Every word helps me measure the hole you're building." Karen pressed her lips together, eyes darting between the cameras and the bench. For the first time, she realized the millions watching at home weren't laughing with her. They were waiting, hungry for the fall. Because in the next moments, Judge Judy wouldn't just respond. She'd execute a quiet, devastating power flip that would become legend. The silence that followed Karen's last sentence could have been measured in heartbeats. 1, 2, 3. And then Judge Judy smiled, not the warm kind, but the kind a lion gives before it moves. "Ms. Lowell," she said, her voice perfectly level, "you've said a lot of things in the past few minutes. Let's unpack them together." Karen straightened her blazer, forcing a smirk. "If we must." "Oh, we must," Judy said softly. "Because you've mistaken this courtroom for a stage. You believe that wealth or pretense equates to respect. It doesn't. What you've displayed here today is the opposite. The desperate flailing of someone who's never had to earn the right to be heard." Karen blinked. Her mouth opened, but Judy kept going. In my courtroom, we don't measure class by handbags or accents. We measure it by conduct. And right now, Ms. Lowell, you are failing spectacularly, the audience murmured. Someone in the back whispered, "Oh, she's in trouble." Karen tried to laugh, but it came out high-pitched. "I'm sorry, are we judging taste now?" Judy didn't even look up. "We're judging integrity. Yours is in foreclosure." The line landed like a strike of lightning. The cameras caught the flicker of humiliation on Karen's face, a twitch at the corner of her mouth, the smallest shift in posture. Daniel Price sat perfectly still. Every word Judy spoke was a salve to months of humiliation and unpaid labor. He didn't need revenge. Judy was delivering it for him, syllable by syllable. "Let's talk about your behavior," Judy continued, flipping through her notes with deliberate slowness. "You've interrupted the opposing party 3 times, rolled your eyes twice, and insulted this bench once. That last one, Ms. Lowell, is the most expensive mistake you've made all year." Karen tried again. "Your Honor, with all due respect." "No," Judy said, holding up a finger. "Don't start with that phrase. It always means the opposite." The audience chuckled nervously, but Judy wasn't done. Her eyes were fixed on Karen like searchlights. "You came in here thinking you could perform superiority. But I was working in the family court system while you were still deciding which brand of lipstick said power. I've dealt with mobsters, manipulators, and self-proclaimed masterminds. And do you know what they all had in common?" Karen didn't answer. They all thought they were smarter than the system until the system reminded them it doesn't kneel. The words reverberated off the wood paneling. Karen's smirk evaporated. "Are you threatening me, Your Honor?" "No," Judy said, voice lowering to a whisper. "I'm educating you." That line sent shivers through the room. She leaned forward, elbows on the bench, gaze unwavering. "Respect is not a luxury brand, Ms. Lowell. It's earned. It's shown when you listen before speaking, when you treat workers with fairness, when you understand that decency costs nothing, and yet somehow you still can't afford it." The gallery erupted in quiet applause before the bailiff's sharp "order" restored silence. Karen sat rigid, jaw clenched, fingers gripping the edge of the table. But her eyes, betraying everything, flickered downward. She wasn't smirking anymore. Judy turned to Daniel. "Mr. Price, you said she refused payment despite written proof of completion." "Yes, Your Honor. I have the text messages right here." "Good," Judy said. "Hold on to those. We'll address them shortly." Then she looked back at Karen, her voice lowering again, the sound of controlled power. "You said a phrase earlier, 'people like you.' That stuck with me, because I am indeed a person like me, someone who worked my way up from nothing, someone who understands exactly what class means, not the kind you're born into, but the kind that's forged by humility, experience, and discipline, the kind you can't fake." Karen's breathing was audible in the microphones now, short. Uneven, Judy's next line would become the quote printed on thousands of TikTok captions. "Real class doesn't whisper down. It lifts up." A collective murmur of agreement swept the audience. Karen sat frozen, her world shrinking to the space between her and the bench. Because the next move Judge Judy made would expose Karen completely, not with words, but with undeniable proof that would leave her speechless. For the first time since the insult, Judge Judy smiled. But it wasn't mercy. It was precision, a surgeon about to make the cleanest cut imaginable. She turned to the bailiff. "Bring me Exhibit B, please." The bailiff nodded and walked toward the evidence table, picking up a folder so thick it could have been a novel. He handed it to the judge with quiet ceremony, and every eye followed it. Karen's lips twitched. "What's that supposed to be?" Judy didn't answer. She just opened the folder. Inside were full-color photos, printed screenshots, and a single USB drive. The courtroom monitors flickered on, showing the first image, a glossy photo of Karen standing in her newly remodeled sunroom, holding a champagne glass. The caption, projected in bold across the monitors, read, "Finally finished. My dream renovation. All thanks to Daniel Price Construction." A collective gasp. Karen's head snapped toward the screen. That's not fair. That was before what?" Judy interrupted. "Before you decided not to pay the man who built it?" Karen's mouth opened, then closed again. "That post was never meant for court." Judy's tone sharpened like glass. "Everything you say in public reflects who you are in private. You boasted about his work when it benefited you, and buried him the moment it cost you. That's not class. That's cowardice. The second image appeared. This time a bank transaction statement. A transfer from Daniel's business account showing material purchases, flooring, paint, glass panels. The amount was highlighted, $7,842. Your Honor, Daniel said quietly, that was all out of pocket. I never even got reimbursed. Karen turned crimson. This is absurd. Those materials weren't for my project alone. He's probably padding his expenses. Judy didn't blink. Funny you should mention that. She nodded toward the bailiff, who pressed play on the next exhibit, a muted 15-second video. The footage showed Karen's front lawn, captured by her neighbor's security camera. There she was, standing on her porch, directing movers as they carried brand-new patio furniture into her sunroom, the one Daniel had built. The kicker? The date stamp. 3 days after she filed her complaint claiming the renovation was unusable, the audience gasped. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." Judy spoke softly now, like a teacher leading a final lesson. You claimed the space was unsafe, Ms. Lowell. Yet here you are hosting a furniture delivery. That doesn't look unsafe. That looks like celebration. Karen's breathing grew louder through the microphones. Her carefully rehearsed poise cracked audibly in her voice. You can't use private footage. It's not private when you're on your front lawn yelling at deliverymen, Judy said. And before you ask, the footage was obtained legally. The neighbor provided it voluntarily after Mr. Price mentioned your denial. Karen's jaw trembled. He had no right. He had every right, Judy said, voice like thunder behind calm words. Because this courtroom doesn't run on your definition of class. It runs on truth. And right now, truth is the one thing you can't fake. Karen slumped back into her chair, silent for the first time since walking in. The weight of public humiliation pressed on her shoulders like gravity itself. Then Judy added the final blow. Ms. Lowell, would you like to tell the court why you also left a 1-star Yelp review for Mr. Price 2 days after that furniture delivery, calling him a lazy handyman who ruined my home? Karen froze. She hadn't expected that one. How did you find that? She whispered. Judy smirked faintly. Because we checked. My producers did what you didn't, their homework. Laughter rippled again through the crowd. Karen's voice cracked. I didn't mean it like that. Oh, but you did, Judy said, cutting her off with surgical timing. You wanted attention. You got it. Congratulations. Now the entire world gets to see what real entitlement looks like. For the first time, Karen's eyes began to well with tears. The mascara kind, not the remorse kind. She looked small now, fragile in her own designer suit, like someone realizing fame wasn't flattering under courtroom lights. Judge Judy leaned back. I think we've heard enough, but before I rule, I'd like to give you the opportunity to say anything truthful for the first time today. Karen stared at the bench, trembling lips parting. I don't know what to say. Good, Judy replied. Then maybe it's time you listen. The audience broke into murmurs, the sound swelling like applause restrained by fear of contempt, because what came next wasn't evidence. It was destruction. The kind that doesn't need proof, only consequences. The courtroom was so quiet you could hear the faint hum of the cameras. Karen Lowell sat motionless, her manicure glinting under the fluorescent lights, the same hands that had once gestured with superiority, now trembling like glass about to crack. Judge Judy closed, the folder with deliberate calm snap. The sound carried through the room like a gunshot. Ms. Lowell, she said, you wanted to talk about class. Let's finish that lesson. Karen swallowed hard. Her lipstick, once immaculate, had started to bleed at the edges. Your Honor, Judy raised a hand. No, not yet, she leaned forward. For the past 40 minutes you've lectured us about refinement, about superiority, about the difference between people like you and people like us. But here's the reality you've avoided your entire life. She tapped the bench once, tap. Class is not inherited. It's demonstrated, tap. And you, Ms. Lowell, have demonstrated nothing but cruelty wrapped in couture. The audience gasped again, not from shock this time, but satisfaction. Karen's voice wavered. I didn't mean to... You meant every word, Judy cut in. You meant it when you humiliated a man who worked for you. You meant it when you called this court beneath you. And you certainly meant it when you called me lower class. You just didn't mean to face consequences. Karen's Mascara streaked down her cheeks now. "Please." "I was angry and I was under stress." "Save it," Judy said, tone still calm. "Stress doesn't invent arrogance. It reveals it." Daniel Price sat silently, his weathered hands folded in his lap. The faintest tremor of emotion crossed his face, not triumph, not gloating, just relief. Judy looked back to Karen. "Do you know what I see when I look at you right now? A woman who's finally run out of mirrors. Every room you've ever walked into reflected back what you wanted to believe. Money, status, control. But this room," she gestured around, "this one reflects truth. And it's not flattering," Karen broke. The sobs came first in little gasps, then full body shakes. Her voice cracked on the edge of hysteria. "I didn't think it would go this far." "It went exactly as far as your choices took it," Judy replied. The bailiff handed her a tissue box without a word. Karen took one but didn't wipe her face. She was too stunned to move, her perfectly constructed image dissolving under courtroom lights. Judy continued, voice lower now, almost reflective. "I've seen people cry in this room for real reasons, because they lost homes, families, children. You're crying because the world finally saw you," Karen whispered. "Everyone's going to see this." "Yes," Judy said simply, "they are. And maybe for the first time, you'll understand the difference between being noticed and being respected." The line drew a soft "wow" from someone in the back. Karen pressed her palms against her eyes. "I'll pay him. I'll do whatever he wants." Judy's gaze softened slightly. "You'll pay him because you owe him, not because you're sorry. And as for what you owe the world," she paused, "that bill's coming too." A tear fell onto the table in front of Karen, splattering the printed photos that had once been her proof of superiority. On screen, that droplet caught the light perfectly, a single reflection of everything she'd lost. Judge Judy leaned back. "Mr. Price," she said gently, "you'll receive full payment of the contract, plus reimbursement for materials and travel costs. Judgment for the plaintiff in the amount of $9,842. Daniel nodded once, eyes glistening. "Thank you, Your Honor." Karen buried her face in her hands. Judy's tone turned final, like a gavel before it struck. "Ms. Lowell, let me leave you with this. Money buys attention, not character. You came in here trying to prove you were above people. But the only thing you've proved is that decency lives below your price range." The gavel hit. Bang! The crowd exhaled. One massive release of tension, applause rising before the bailiff's warning could even start. Karen Lowell stayed seated, mascara streaked and silent. For the first time, she truly had nothing left to say. But outside that courtroom, the world was already watching. And what happened next would turn her private shame into a public reckoning. The gavel's echo still hung in the air. Karen sat motionless. The sound had pinned her in place like a sentence that would never end. Judge Judy stood, gathered her papers, and left the bench without another word. The audience didn't move. They just stared, caught in the gravity of what they'd just witnessed. The cameras zoomed in on Karen's trembling hands, the way her fingers pressed against the edge of the desk, not to steady herself, but to make sure she was still real. Then the narrator's voice broke through the silence. "Pause this video right here. If you believe justice was served today," comment "justice served" in the chat right now, "and tell me, what would you have said to Karen if you were Judge Judy for 1 minute?" The screen glitched with comments flooding in. Hearts, emojis, thousands of voices typing at once. Justice served. Finally, someone said it. Respect isn't optional. The world was speaking back. Back in the courtroom, production assistants moved quietly, collecting documents, resetting microphones, and guiding Daniel Price toward the exit. He nodded politely to them, his movement small but full of dignity. "Sir," one of the crew whispered, "you just became part of television history." Daniel smiled faintly. "I didn't want history. I just wanted fairness." Outside, the hallway was brighter, harsh, unfiltered sunlight bouncing off the white tile. Daniel stopped near the exit door, the one marked plaintiff's side, and looked back through the glass at the courtroom he'd just walked out of. Behind him, through that same door, Karen sat alone at the table, still frozen. The cameras weren't rolling anymore, but it didn't matter. Her performance was over. For a moment, the world seemed divided between those two doors, one leading to peace, the other to consequences. The scene dissolved into a slow, cinematic montage. Daniel walking out into the daylight, his hands in his pockets, the faintest smile ghosting his face. Karen in the shadow of the empty courtroom, staring at the silent monitors that had once broadcast her arrogance. Judge Judy in chambers, writing final notes in her sharp cursive before sliding the file closed forever. If this story restored your faith in accountability, the narrator says, hit that like button right now. Let's see how many people still believe that arrogance has consequences. Then, with deliberate pacing, the music shifted, softer, almost bittersweet. Because while the courtroom had gone quiet, the internet was just waking up. Clips from the episode were already being uploaded by viewers who'd recorded the broadcast, shared across TikTok, YouTube Shorts, Twitter, and Reddit within hours. Thumbnails screamed things like, "Karen calls Judge Judy lower class, instantly regrets it. You won't believe what Judge Judy said next." The comment sections exploded. Veterans, single mothers, contractors, teachers, people from every walk of life flooded in with stories about being underestimated, disrespected, talked down to. It wasn't just about one Karen anymore. It was about every person who'd ever been made to feel small by someone pretending to be better. Karen's name trended before the episode even finished airing. Her face, and once made up to project control, became a symbol of collapse. The moral tide was turning, and it wasn't slowing down. Your turn, viewer. If you think Judge Judy handled that perfectly, type "respect isn't optional" in the comments, because what comes next will show you just how far karma travels once it starts moving. Because by morning, Karen's humiliation wouldn't belong to that courtroom anymore. It would belong to the entire internet. By the next morning, the courtroom clip had become the story of the internet. It wasn't just trending, it was everywhere. Across every platform, every feed, every corner of social media, the same 20 seconds played on loop. Karen Lowell leaning back, smirking and saying, "You're lower class," followed by Judge Judy's stare, the kind that didn't need words to destroy a person. Twitter blew up within hours. Hashtag lower class Karen. Hashtag Judy Justice 3 hashtags trended simultaneously, climbing past celebrity scandals and political news. The clip hit 25 million views before noon. By sunset, it had passed 100 million. Reaction videos flooded TikTok. Veterans, teachers, single parents, and even former courtroom defendants stitched the moment with their own captions. That stare should be a national security weapon. I felt that gavel hit through my soul. The internet had found its villain and its hero. Karen Lowell's name was suddenly a search term. Her real estate website crashed under the weight of traffic. Her Google reviews went from polite professionalism to a battlefield of furious commenters. I wouldn't trust her to sell a lemonade stand. Guess she's too classy for customer service. Hope she learns humility faster than escrow. The fallout was swift and brutal. Within 48 hours, her brokerage issued a public statement. "We do not condone the behavior displayed by Ms. Lowell during her appearance on Judge Judy. Effective immediately. Her contract with our agency has been terminated." Her phone, once her lifeline of deals and appointments, stopped ringing. Clients cancelled contracts. Vendors refused to work with her. Even her luxury brand sponsorships quietly pulled out, deleting old posts that had once featured her face. She tried to defend herself online, posting a long apology video on Instagram. "I was under stress. The editing made me look worse. I never meant to insult anyone." But within an hour, the video had more dislikes than views. Comments piled up like a digital avalanche. "Editing didn't make you say it. Arrogance isn't stress. You called Judge Judy lower class. Good luck selling anything now." And then came the TV news. Morning talk shows replayed the clip with slow-motion replays, and commentators dissecting the psychology of entitlement. Podcasts debated it as a case study in modern arrogance. Even late-night hosts cracked jokes. One comedian summed it up best. "When you call Judge Judy lower class, that's not confidence. That's a career suicide note." Meanwhile, Daniel Price, the quiet contractor she'd humiliated, had no idea the world had chosen him as its symbol of dignity. A neighbor called him the morning after the broadcast. "Dan, you need to check your phone. You're famous," he laughed. "What for?" "My crooked fence?" Then he opened his messages. Hundreds, thousands. People thanking him for staying calm, for not lashing out, for proving that integrity doesn't need volume. It needs patience. One message stood out. It was from a veteran in Ohio. You reminded me of my dad. He always said class isn't clothes and it's conduct. Thank you for showing that. Within days, Daniel's small contracting business was booked solid. Homeowners from neighboring towns flooded him with requests. His inbox filled with job offers and gratitude. When a local reporter visited him for an interview, Daniel said something that went viral on its own. "I didn't go there to win on TV. I went there to tell the truth." Judge Judy just made sure the world heard it. That clip became its own meme, a quiet man's line cutting louder than all the noise. Back in Los Angeles, Karen Lowell tried to rebuild her image, hiring a PR firm, deleting her social media, even changing her company name. But it didn't matter. The internet doesn't forget, and justice, once public, is permanent. She'd gone from luxury agent to lesson in humility overnight, and, as one viral comment put it perfectly, Karen tried to measure class by money and lost to a contractor with morals. But what came next wasn't just social media outrage, it was a cultural echo. A reminder that in Judge Judy's courtroom, and in life, respect is the only real currency. When the dust settled, when the hashtags began to fade and the outrage turned to analysis, one truth remained. You can buy luxury. You can buy attention, but you can't buy respect. For weeks, talk shows, podcasts, and essays kept coming back to the same moment, those 20 seconds of silence that had frozen an entire courtroom. People called it the stare that defined justice. Clips were slowed down, soundtracked, and studied like film school material. Why? Because it wasn't just entertainment anymore. It was a cultural mirror. Judge Judy didn't raise her voice. She didn't insult back. She didn't need to. Her silence said everything generations have been trying to teach, that power without humility collapses. That arrogance always mistakes attention for admiration. That real class is never spoken. It's shown. Online think pieces appeared with titles like "Why the Internet Needed Judge Judy's Silence." The moment justice looked like dignity. Meanwhile, schools, ethics teachers, and even corporate trainers began showing the clip, not as courtroom drama, but as a lesson in composure, consequence, and the cost of disrespect. One business professor put it simply, "In 20 seconds, she taught what my students spend a semester learning, that leadership without respect is just ego with better lighting." Karen Lowell disappeared from public life after her firing. But her name remained shorthand for self-inflicted downfall. Every few months, a new meme would surface, the smirk, the stare, the silence, captioned with variations of "How to end an argument without saying a word." Yet what most viewers remembered wasn't Karen's humiliation. It was Daniel's restraint. Because while she yelled, he listened. While she postured, he stood steady. And when the world gave him its attention, he used it not to boast, but to thank those who believed in fairness. He became a quiet hero in a noisy age. Not for winning, but for how he won. If you're watching this and you've ever been underestimated, ever been talked down to, ever been told you're less than, this story is your reminder. Respect doesn't come from status. It comes from how you treat people when no one's watching. Comment, "Respect isn't optional" below if you agree. And tell me, what does real class mean to you? The screen fades between faces. A nurse finishing a night shift, a teacher erasing a board, a mechanic wiping his hands, a single mum closing her store. Each one looks up at the camera, quiet but strong, because class, it turns out, has nothing to do with wealth. It has everything to do with worth. Karen's arrogance became a warning. Daniel's patience became a standard. And Judge Judy's silence became a message, one that still echoes long after the applause faded. You don't need to shout to command respect. You just need to live in a way that earns it. The music swells and low strings, the rhythm of a heartbeat. Then the narrator leans in with one last engagement line, the final spark before the outro. If this story reminded you that kindness is strength, hit the subscribe button right now. Because the next case might just restore your faith in humanity all over again. Because in the world of Judge Judy, justice doesn't end with a gavel. It echoes through every person who remembers why respect still matters. The courtroom lights dimmed, but the story didn't end there. Because moments like that, those 20 seconds of silence, that stare, that shift in the air, don't fade. They echo. Days later, the network released the full uncut version of the case. It aired during prime time, and more than 20 million viewers tuned in to watch. But what stood out wasn't the insult or even the ruling. It was what came after. As the credits rolled, a behind-the-scenes clip played. Judge Judy, off camera, removing her robe and saying quietly to a producer, "People forget. Respect is the foundation of law. Without it, justice collapses." That single unscripted line became a second viral wave. It wasn't fury that made her powerful, it was composure. It wasn't punishment that made her respected, it was principle. In the days that followed, tributes poured in from across the world. Clips of Judge Judy's past rulings resurfaced, moments where arrogance was cut down by logic, where pride fell before truth. Commentators called it the silence heard around the world, but behind all the virality, there was one quieter truth. Daniel Price returned home to his workshop, the same small space where he had built furniture for decades. A TV crew found him sanding a table, wearing the same flannel shirt he'd worn in court. When asked how it felt to go viral, he just smiled and said, "You don't need 1,000,000 views to know what's right. You just need to sleep at night with a clean conscience." He didn't capitalize on the fame. He didn't start an account or chase interviews. He just kept building, fixing, and showing up, like he always had. Meanwhile, Karen Lowell vanished from public life entirely. No press statements, no interviews, just silence, the same kind she'd once mocked, now her permanent companion. In a poetic twist, her final act of relevance had been giving the world a lesson in humility. She had wanted to be admired for her class. Instead, she became the example of what happens when you mistake luxury for character. "The world doesn't punish arrogance," a commentator said during a recap segment. "It simply lets you expose yourself and then it watches you learn." The closing montage plays, Judge Judy in her chambers, writing another case note under warm light. Daniel in his shop, sanding wood, the dust catching the sunbeam through the window. A shot of the courtroom, empty chairs, the quiet hum of fluorescent bulbs. As the camera pans toward the judge's bench, it doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes justice is just a stare that reminds the world that arrogance is temporary, but integrity lasts forever. Then, a beat of silence. Before you scroll away, I want to hear from you. What moment in this story hit you the hardest? Was it the insult, the silence, or the realization that power means nothing without grace? Comment below, and if you believe that respect still matters, share this story with someone who needs the reminder. The background fades to black. Text appears in white serif font across the screen. Class isn't measured by what you own. It's proven by how you treat people. Soft piano plays. Then the closing line appears. Bold, unmistakable. The same signature that defines your storytelling brand. Remember, in Judge Judy's courtroom and in life, respect isn't optional. The piano fades. A faint echo of the gavel bangs once, then silence again. The same silence that started it all. Finally, a teaser fades in with a low cinematic hum. Next on Judge Judy Stories. A mother lied about her son's inheritance until Judge Judy asked one question that changed everything.